Have you ever been on one of those short-term missions trips, where you go for sort of 3-4 weeks, maybe a couple of months, where you just go and you're doing mission work, working in a local community, maybe helping with some practical needs, as well as bringing a faith message? I mean, it would be fair to say that over recent years, the received wisdom on that has been that it's a good thing to do. It provides an opportunity for projects and so on to get some short-term help. And of course, it's good for the person that's going. It broadens our horizons. It helps us understand a little bit more the reality of it. And in no way would I want to knock the genuine impact of that. Because I know that when I had the opportunity to go for a very short period of time, just a few days, and meet with Christians in Kurdistan and the impact of what was going on for them at that time, it had a lasting impact on me and changed my perspective about how I speak about mission and how I speak about Christians around the world. So don't want to in any way knock or undermine that impact, but is it actually sometimes more about us than the best benefit for those projects we go to? Simon Foulds is from the Langham Partnership, and he's been thinking about this recently. And, well, fair to say, Simon, that you kind of wonder whether it is the best outcome for those projects.
You do. I completely agree with everything you said, Paul. I think it does shape, people that go on that. It shapes your own thinking and that particular region. But yeah, the question I'd ask is, then what? After you've been there for your 3 or 4 weeks and you've been there and you've been inspired, what is it that's there afterwards? And that's certainly the question Langham would be asking. What's it's a short-term mission, so it's going to be short-term impact. What about the long-term impact? What are we going to do to engage with those people? What do they need that's going to be there on a long-term basis rather than just on a short-term? So that'll certainly be the question that Langham would be asking.
Because it is fair to say that short-term missions, very often they do involve the spending of thousands of pounds per individual to go and to be hosted and to be present in a community and all of that. And perhaps the thought is that, well, supporting Indigenous local leadership and development of ministry might be a better way forward.
Langham would certainly agree with that. I think, a key piece of work that we're involved in is our scholarship program. So we get Indigenous people, local people that have huge potential, and they go off and do their training, their studying, usually to a PhD level. And then part of the deal is if they have had a Langham scholarship, they'll go back to their home country for at least 10 years. And within those 10 years, be setting up ministries, working within ministries, and doing work on the ground level. And obviously, they're Indigenous to where they are, so they know the culture, they know the people, and they know what's needed. The example I love sharing is a pastor in Beirut, and he is a Langham scholar, graduated, went back to his church in Beirut, and pretty much at the same time as he's going back to his church was when the Syrian conflict started and the civil war there, and the amount of refugees coming over from Syria into Lebanon. And he saw his church grow from 300 to about 3,000 people. But he was there, he knew the culture, he knew what was happening, and he'd got the resources, the training to manage that and put the leadership structure in place to manage and bring those 3,000 people to a deeper faith, well, either to a new faith in Christ or a deeper faith in Christ. So it's having those people on the ground and being able to do that and knowing the culture and being there for the long term.
So what is how do we balance that then? Because the truth is, the money that's often raised for somebody to go on a short-term mission it's raised because that person is going on a short-term mission and they're able to tap into the resources that are around them, and they're able to connect, undoubtedly mum and dad are putting their hand in their pocket and, all of that's going on. Or you've got people who at the end of their working life are going, we're going to do this and we're going to use some of our retirement, some of our pension to fund it. So that money is being provided because of the specific. I mean, in truth, if we took that specific out of it, would we still be able to raise the money to actually do the support that you're describing?
I mean, it's always a challenge. I think in that context, I would love people to be thinking that that if they'd been on that short-term mission and they'd seen what the need was there, and that hopefully they'd have their eyes open to see the long-term mission that's needed there, that they'd come back and carry on that passion like you were sharing about yours, that you've always got that thinking and praying and passion for the countries that you've been in. Hopefully those people would come back and carry that on and see the long-term impact that they could have, and carry on fundraising and carry on supporting that region, and looking at the long-term impact. So I suppose that would be my prayer, my thought, if people going on those sort of short-term missions, that they do see the long-term aspect of it as well.
And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? If some sort of hybrid of the system could be actually created, so that when people go, yes, you can be a part of a short-term mission, but actually it's more of a sowing of a bigger vision, that you actually carry on then your connection and see the value of supporting those locally who are there day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out.
100%. Well, saying that I've used quite regularly at the moment, we're part of God's kingdom, and God's kingdom doesn't recognise the UK or anywhere else. It's one kingdom, and we're all part of it. So, I'd love people to get that vision of just being part of the kingdom, and wherever they are, and if that means travelling somewhere and seeing somewhere and then seeing it and just picturing, we'll never get the whole idea, the whole picture, but they can start to see the enormity of God's kingdom, and that somebody in Beirut, somebody elsewhere is part of it. We're part of it, and just start to get that picture of unity, that we are all in the same kingdom. Yeah,
and the opportunity to be trained through something like Langham as well. It does give a wider perspective for people in terms of how they're responding to not just the spiritual realities of their world, but also the cultural and the historical realities of their world, which are perhaps less than positive. I mean, I heard a story about one of your trainees who is actually changing the way people think in Ethiopia about something that's a long-grain tradition, as appalling as it might seem to those of us in the West.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a horrendous story. So this is another scholar in Ethiopia, and she. It's amazing. We perhaps don't realise this, but as soon as you get a PhD, so you're a doctor, whoever you are, you get listened to when you're a doctor, and you have that prefix in front of your name. So this doctor in Ethiopia was able to speak to government and share into that whole cultural practice there about female genital mutilation and just the horrendous practice of that. And was able to speak into the government and get them to start changing their thinking. And for women that had been affected by that, hearing, and it was a female doctor as well, hearing a female doctor stand up for that, was getting them able to speak about it as well. Yeah. So, real practical, down to earth, very painful physical issues that can be dealt with on a long-term basis. Yeah.
And the way in which that can be put into place, the way that can be done, and the impact that can have is absolutely phenomenal. You can find out more at uklangham.org. Have a look at that to find out more about what the Langham Partnership does. But it is perhaps something for us to challenge ourselves about. And if you've been on a short-term mission, well, the question then is, what now? What impact has that had on you? And what impact are you having on those who you went to and you saw now? it's a challenging thought, isn't it? And something that Langham is all about. And Simon, good to speak to you about it today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Paul.